In preceding videos, I've mentioned that there can be costs borne by the user when enacting security tasks. Unit 1 of the first course, Foundation and Framework, also discusses a range of security-related costs, where here we unpack the costs at the user level in more detail. Here, to consider what all these costs are for, we will consider potential human-related harms. These can be losses, as are commonly referred to and as Hurley has done in the analysis of externalities placed on users. However, a reference to losses could be assumed to refer to some resource which can be replenished. Human costs of security incidents may have long-lasting effects or change the person. An example would be if a user is a victim of an online social engineering attack, they may choose to stop interacting with digital services as a result, having lost trust in computers as being something that is safe to use. Here, I refer to the taxonomy of harms compiled by Agraphiotis et al. They refer to harms which may occur within an organization setting and across the wider organization as a result of a cybersecurity incident such as a data breach. That is not to say that these harms manifest only within an organization and for the whole organization. We can consider whether they affect the individual within the organization. We can also consider whether they can affect home users as well, who are in essence responsible for their own home IT infrastructure. The 5 categories in the taxonomy are physical and digital, economic, psychological, reputational, and social and societal. Physical and digital can include many outcomes covered across this and other courses, such as theft, leakage, compromise, and a reduction in performance. It can also include physical pain or injury to a person and loss of life. Economic harms are not only loss of money, but can also include, for example, disruptions to operations or subsequent loss to customers or legal payments, and so on. Focusing on psychological harms, these can include confusion, worry, anxiety, embarrassment, shame, guilt, and loss of satisfaction. An employee may, for instance, feel guilt or shame if they are tricked into entering work credentials on a phishing website. This can have a knock-on effect where they then do not report the event because of that shame they feel. They may also feel less confident in completing their work after that point and feel heightened anxiety whenever they interact with unfamiliar emails. Where the taxonomy refers to reputational and social and societal harms, these refer more to the organization as a whole, including damage to public perception or to relationships with customers, but also disruption to daily lives and a loss of morale. Such harms can translate to individuals as well, for instance, when users feel shame for clicking on a phishing link. When considering the range of potential harms resulting from a cybersecurity incident, we can see why those people responsible for an IT ecosystem will want to protect it. These service owners will deploy security and privacy controls to manage cyber risks. An implicit assumption in much of this activity is that well-meaning cyber risk controls have only positive effects. As shown in the paper Identifying Unintended Harms of Cybersecurity Countermeasures by Chua et al., there can then be unintended harms in cyber risk management which must be considered. For example, if an organization deploys an email filter to reduce the number of malicious emails reaching users, the messaging around this would have to be managed carefully. Otherwise, users may trust that the filter removes all malicious emails, which it might do over time once they are reported, stopping the same or similar emails from reaching users, but not necessarily immediately. A user may then trust that any email in their inbox is one they can trust. Similar effects may be seen with embedded phishing training, where users might interpret seeing a training page after clicking a link as a signal that their organization is protecting them from threats. Well-intended cyber risk controls may affect users in a range of ways, including displacement, which basically moves the problem out of the service owner's view, but to somewhere else rather than removing it entirely. Creation of insecure norms, as in the above email filter example. Additional costs to users, as in burdensome security and where there is risk dumping on non-expert users to be responsible for securing their organization or online communities. Misuse, where controls meant to provide additional protection are used for malicious purposes. For instance, if a user reports another user on a social media or gaming platform when there is a personal grievance. Misclassification, where legitimate users may, for example, have some aspect of their online profile which is covered within a classification rule that is intended to prevent only malicious actors, but is too general, such as physical location. Amplification attacks can happen when the protective measure makes matters worse. For example, if action is taken to protect a person's digital accounts or devices, from a perpetrator of technology-facilitated abuse or tech abuse, wherein it may be noticed and the perpetrator escalates to physical violence. Disruption may result if a countermeasure disrupts other controls. Examples include if multiple advice bodies target the same population with advice, but the advice from these different sources subtly or massively contradicts each other, confusing the user that was supposed to be helped or inducing errors when they tried to do the right thing for security. Adding to the types of unintended harm detailed on the last slide, there may be groups which are especially at risk of experiencing harm from the countermeasure. Underprotected groups of legitimate users, typically referred to as vulnerable populations, may not have the capacity to use any security controls provided to them. They may be affected by multiple harms at once, or they may be forgotten by the system if countermeasures have reduced their capacity to highlight that they have been adversely affected by a heavy-handed control. Such users may then need representation or advocacy of some sort to carry their needs to the service owner or the wider community. Discernible vulnerable populations can include older adults among home users, small businesses within the wider business community, which have fewer, if any, dedicated IT staff and less resources for security protections, and home users with disabilities or impairments, for instance. When a service owner considers or acts to deploy a cyber risk countermeasure, they will potentially have incomplete information from their perspective. They may take action to reduce risks which adversely affect a legitimate user. That user's capabilities within the managed service could be curtailed, much as a malicious user's capabilities would be as the actual intended effect. If a legitimate user is impacted in this way, they may not be able to bring this to the service owner's attention. Further, it may not be possible to undo the unintended harm as if it is an atomic reversible action. The user may experience impacts, much like those described in the taxonomy of harms, beyond being denied access to the managed service. So, once a legitimate user is impacted, the damage is done, and trying to bring them back may be impossible or best bear a different cost. It is not necessarily that they can be given what they missed out on and everything is fine again. This is comparable to a data leak where deleting the data from wherever it should not be does not remove all the harms upon the victim of the data leak. A moral hazard can be created where a cyber risk control impacts legitimate users but does not create an adverse or harmful effect for the system owner. This would be the case for disempowered users and those unable to make their voice heard from the outside once a blunt control removes them. There is silence for the service owner. Or put another way, the service owner would likely only notice if they deployed a countermeasure which was so badly designed that it excluded a sizable subset of legitimate users.